All right, folks, as promised in a video that probably isn't even out yet, so you probably haven't seen it, I'm going to do a review of the Dick Tracy Casebook, Favorite Adventures, 1931 to 1990. This is a collection of the best or the fan favorite adventures of the Dick Tracy comic strip from 1931 to 1990. I believe the strip ran longer than that, but that's just the era that this encompasses. So, if you like Chester Gould, who was the original creator, most of the work in this is by Chester Gould, and then later he was replaced by Max Allan Collins and Rick Fletcher, and then Dick Locher, I've heard it pronounced. I'm not sure the proper pronunciation, but anyway, very classic Dick Tracy artists, and in the original black and white newspaper strip style. And this early stuff will still be Chester Gould. Really stark, nice line work. You know, at this time, you couldn't do a lot of fine shading detail with grays and blacks. The printing technology just didn't support it. So you had to have a really solid black line, and he really did. And what I really appreciate about this stuff is I've read this whole book, and if your only exposure to Dick Tracy is the Warren Beatty movie, you are doing yourself a disservice. I don't think it would be hyperbole or exaggeration at all to compare this work of Chester Gould's and the later artists who took over with the work of, say, Ian Fleming's original James Bond novels. And I think there's a lot of parallels, unlike what we see in most comics where the characters are perpetually the same age and don't have they have character progression and characterization, but they don't necessarily move out of that age group. So you're perpetually retconning their origins. In this case, just like the original James Bond stories by Ian Fleming, Dick Tracy ages through the story. The kid who he adopts grows up. He actually chooses a name. I'm not going to ruin it for those who don't know, instead of just being known as the kid. He gets married. Dick Tracy gets married. He actually retires and he becomes a training officer for other detectives and agents. And that all kind of elapses through this collection of stories simply because it's the best stuff spread out over 50 years. But, it's not often you can say a comic strip has lasted that long. Dick Tracy did. And in many cases, there's a lot more darkness and a lot more crime than you realize, a lot more murder. How Dick Tracy escaped the scrutiny of the censorship in the 1950s that got rid of most crime comics, I'm not sure. It's funny that there are some very mature themes in here, and this was a daily newspaper strip that people of all ages could access and read. And meanwhile, in the 50s, protests pretty much eliminated that in the comic book industry for a long time and introduced the Comics Code. But apparently with newspaper strips, it was fine. Now, this is definitely later work by Max Allan Collins and Dick Locher. So you can see that the character changes and evolves in his design and the look throughout the series. I should mention, I'm not naturally a video guy. I'm not a videographer. If you want me to produce a comic book or a novel or whatever, I can do that. But when it comes to video, my initial instinct is to rush through it and get through it as quickly as possible so that it's done. Part of that is my anxiety. But I just want to show this off and talk about my appreciation for it. Just the storytelling is surprisingly good, and you'll find when you see a whole page like this outlined with a more elaborate panel design, I believe those are the Sunday strips. And then you'll find, and these may be I could be wrong, but these may be a lot of Sunday strips in the back. Maybe the strip went to Sundays later. Whereas this here, you can definitely tell that was a daily strip. Here's a 3-panel daily strip, 3-panel daily strip, 2-panel, 3-panel. These more tightly packed, closer ones, to me look like Sunday strips, but I could be wrong. Again, that's a daily strip, that's a daily strip, that's a daily strip. But here's an example of the kid grown up, you know, so he has his own life. He comes up with some interesting life choices as he gets older, and I don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't read it, but really good stuff, more than just the Warren Beatty version, and really classic characters, interesting ways of portraying villains like Pruneface and Flat Top and multiple other characters, and also, like, in a way, keeping with the tradition of the original Batman comics before he took off and became a household name. In the original Batman comics, Batman carried a gun and he shot bad guys. That was before they decided that he was against killing. And definitely, a lot of the famous, well-known villains from Dick Tracy, with the funny names and faces and designs, they get killed in here. Like, they're not a perpetual villain like in a lot of other comic strips and comic books. Like, he goes through a cast of rogues because he he doesn't kill them all, but they tend to die in horrible ways caused by their own actions trying to evade apprehension. And there's actually a lot more storytelling than people give a daily newspaper strip credit for. And just when looking at this, I'm thinking about what I like to remind modern comics fans of is they didn't have computers to do anything like this later. This is all hand-drawn. There's no Photoshop helping with backgrounds, no cheating, no fillers, nothing. No pattern fills, no zip tone. This is all hand-drawn with pen and ink, and you really got to give it up for artists of this time. Just the amount of time and effort and manpower and thought, especially for your whites and darks, especially like in this panel here, using kind of the black fill that comes from the floor and blends with Tracy's coat. It draws your attention to the lighter parts of the panel, and the shape frames the focus, which is this baby that's under the camera. Again, we've got a dark fill, and then we've got these bushes that help kind of frame our subject over here. This kind of planning and detail had to go into every panel, and it's just something that I think I shouldn't say novices, no, but something that newer artists and people just starting out really take for granted. Just the amount of thought and planning that needs to go into things, because there are so many digital shortcuts today. This is some classic stuff, though, and I believe there's Pruneface, and he's not having a good time. And I don't want to ruin the storyline for you or how that concludes, but really cool stuff. I'm a big fan of Chester Gould, and I used to collect a lot of the Gemstone. I think they were called Gemstone at the time. Reprints of the Chester Gould comics were colorized in the late 80s, early 90s and collected. And I don't have those anymore, but I do have this. And this is not the only Dick Tracy collection that I have, but it is currently the only one listed in my eBay store. So if you like what you see, you might be able to catch it still. If it's still in the store, where can you find that? It's linked to my page at mikegagno.ca, which you'll find in the description. And who sponsors these videos? Me. Yep, yours truly, because this is what I love, and I love doing this, and I am so happy to share it with you. So thank you for watching, and have a great day.